So this is interesting to me. As of 3 hours ago, we have a new announcement from OpenAI. They're going to do a leadership transition. Now, this is important if you are in software or technology at all, because obviously, and this public statement, it's very critical to look at the words they use and the words they don't use. Like a lot of public announcements by companies that are making lots of money, you can tell a lot if you're willing to read between the lines. And so in this video, I am going to show you how to read between the lines, make some assumptions, and point out things based on my experience in prior executive roles as an engineer and somebody who's been historically focused on the engineering side to the point where, I have to admit now where it probably would have been better for my career if I had focused more on the business and people side. And so that's what I'm going to do now in the future. But let's read this now. And the first big statement, Sam Altman, well known figure, but also let's just say he has a reputation. And the fact that he's departing the company is kind of an interesting way of putting that. Especially since the next one is saying, we're going to find a permanent successor. Uh, this is it's said the 501c3 is a fancy way of saying that they're complying with the legal code for the fact that it's technically a charity, it's technically a nonprofit, but uh, yeah, they're making too much money and they're not doing a lot with it. Uh, so I wouldn't personally consider them to be a nonprofit, but hey, that's what the legal paperwork surely says, and so it doesn't matter what I think. Um, but I'm hopeful that they remain a nonprofit, and I'm hopeful that they act as a nonprofit. But because Sam Altman was involved, I honestly believe that they wouldn't. And so the fact that he's leaving now is a big deal because what it says is that either A, they're going to get taken over by new people with new roles and new agendas, or they're going to become more focused on the 501c3 aspect of their business and an attempt to be truly nonprofit. And as somebody who currently pays them money every month because I needed a way to uh, experiment with their technology, I'm looking at this and kind of pondering. So today announced this will depart as CEO and leave the board of directors. Okay, so this is kind of a big deal. So a CEO is not always a member of the board of directors. They can have a very minimal role or they can be a big part of it. And a lot of smaller companies, the CEO is typically, the entire board of directors minus the lawyer or something. And so as a result of that, um, this is him being removed from two positions, not just one. And that's kind of a big deal. Mira, the chief technology officer, I don't know what her credentials are. I've never met her. Don't know who she is outside of the public eye. Um, is stepping in, and this is interesting because I've also noticed that CTOs tend to be picked only when there's no other direction. Uh, and it's kind of sad, but in most businesses, they don't typically look at the CTO as, leadership of the entire company. So this is actually good. It means that they are really, truly trying to be connected to the technology. And who knows, mostly just trying to assure the transition doesn't leave, with that tribal knowledge, maybe. I don't know. But, for all I know, Mira threw him under the bus. We don't know. We just don't know. And so we can't make assumptions. Uh, Mira, obviously, they're putting a lot of effort here. They've got an entire paragraph here just trying to make people feel better about the situation and the fact that she's stepping in the role. I assume that's because they're worried about, public perception and whatnot. And so what they're doing here is they're pointing out that she's done the job for a while, she's been successful through the growth, et cetera, et cetera. AKA nothing's really changing. It's just someone is getting a better title and they've worked for a while. So, give them that is basically what they're saying. But they're also pointing out that she's not going to be the permanent CEO. They are going to, do this to get this seamless transition going, probably to pump her for as much information as possible so that the next leader who comes in can get rid of her, which is typically the pattern. And, while they do the search for the permanent CEO. So I consider this to be kind of I think the best way of putting it is that her being put in that role is probably being done to make sure that the technology doesn't get lost or abandoned. It's probably to make sure that they can solidify the resources of the company and make sure that they're actually still there with Sam gone, so that Sam doesn't leave with all the tribal knowledge and suddenly they have no runway. That's probably the fear of the board. And the thing that gets me about this though is that his departure follows a deliberative review process by the board. Now, this sentence is like I could write a book about this one sentence based on my personal experience with boards. And the fact is, a lot of boards are disengaged. And if you think of the board as the people who steer the ship and tell the captain what to do, if you think of them as the waves of the sea, well, no, that's not the right best analogy because it's more like customers, the market's the sea. They are the favorable wind. They are the people who kind of help guide the ship in the way it wants to go, and a lot of them are really disengaged. And so when someone has to do a deliberative review, it's kind of a big deal because what that means is somebody messed up enough to get the eye of Sauron on them. And at that point, somebody was angry enough that they actually did the work. And somebody on the board actually did the work to figure out what was going on because Mr. Altman's decided that he was, I guess Mr. Altman decided that you know what? I'm not going to go there. What I will say is that it's very uncommon for the board to have to do a deliberative review because what's going to happen typically is the board has touch points. That's what board meetings are for. It's just to make sure everybody's still on the same page and things are done as needed as part of the formal process that's already been agreed. And so if you're on a board and you're not up to date already, that's already a red flag. And so the fact that they had to go in and say, hey, wait, the landscape, the world as we thought it was, isn't real. We have to go back and figure out what it really looks like now. That is a huge, huge thing. And so the rest of this sentence kind of confirms that, which says, concluded that he is not consistently candid with his communications with the board. Wow. This is business speak for this guy lied to us. Okay? That's something you need to understand. This is not something that a company would write publicly about somebody if it wasn't true, because there'd be a lot of legal liability. The fact that they're willing to actually say this as plainly as they are, given the additional context that I've given you, is wow. Like, it must be something big. It must be something huge. And they, and so hindering its ability to exercise its responsibilities. Oof. So this is code for regulation and law. And what that means is if I take this in its entirety, is they suddenly found out that the world as they knew it wasn't the world in reality. they had to go back and actually do an investigation to figure out what really was going on. And then they found out that they'd been lied to, not candid with his communications. And then because of that, it was hindering their ability for regulatory compliance. That's what I read out of this. Now, I have no idea if that's actually what happened, but I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me. This is the vibe that I get from this. And the fact that the board has no longer has any confidence in his ability to continue leading. Whew. So, to go over that, something happened. The board realized they did the double take and went, what? Looked into it deeper, realized something was going wrong, realized he hadn't been entirely candid, realized that that was stopping their ability to do the stuff that they were required to do. And as a result, they have absolutely no faith in this guy. I said it at the start of the video. He has a reputation. So kind of expected this personally, but I wasn't going to say anything until it actually happened because that's how I don't want my own career to be destroyed because I said something that wasn't true, right? So, but I look at this and I go, wow, this is huge. And so, this is huge for any company. They found out that their leader was not leading. It was, not candid. And so I guess this statement, like before I even read this, I knew what this statement would say. It would just affect it. I knew because there's a pattern here is that you say you're going to fire your leadership, and then you assure everybody that don't worry, everything's still fine. We have everything we need to be successful. Someone else is going to take over, and everything's going to be fine. It's going to be like nothing ever happened, and that's exactly what they say here. They're pointing out that everything was deliberately structured in advance to make sure that it's not going to benefit just one person. Okay, so that's what their legal framework says. They're pointing out here that they're legally obligated not to just cater to Mr. Altman's whims, and as a result of that, they are legally required to benefit all of humanity. I don't know if that's an actual requirement, if it's part of their structure or not, but they're claiming it is. So we're just going to accept that here. And the board that's there remains fully committed to serving its mission. That's important because later on they actually get rid of a guy from chairman of the board. So we'll talk about that later. And yeah, fully committed. So the board that's there is fully committed serving that mission. Great. They did the spiel of being grateful for his contributions to the founding and growth, but they believe that new leadership is necessary. Okay, da-da-da. And they're pointing out that Mira is responsible for the censoring of OpenAI, and they call it safety functions. But that's why OpenAI has gotten dumber, honestly. So they're pointing out that they're going to put the person in charge that's making the system more dumb, which I don't believe is the right idea. But oh well. She's been around. She knows what she's doing, according to them, and they have the utmost confidence in her ability to lead OpenAI during this transition period. I mean, from Sam's perspective, he's probably thinking that the CTO threw him under the bus to get a promotion. I mean, that's what I would think if my CTO took my job. But then again, the board explicitly said that they had no confidence in here because they concluded. So they did an investigation. So that wouldn't be a fair assessment either. They say they have evidence, or just enough to be, hey, good enough for them. So it should be good enough for us, right? Yeah, let's see. So their board of directors is so they're pointing out the difference between the different people on the board, and one of the things that's really interesting about this statement is that they're making the important distinction that Ilya Sutskever, I can't say the name right, I'm sorry, has equity, while the other ones don't. This is what independent means. And so the end result is that this person has equity in the company and has ownership and is still on the board of directors. This group of people, they are on the board of directors, but they don't have any equity in it. Like they could walk away and it would just be less money in their bank account because they're probably getting a stipend or a pay or something for being on the board. There's generally something that happens, and it kind of, I mean, I'm not going to get into that now, but basically, it's good for you in various ways to be on a board. And so I can't imagine that they're not getting anything, if only by association. Um, and so this is important to understand is that independent versus non-independent. And so this is interesting. As part of the transition, this guy will be stepping down as chairman of the board and will remain in his role at the company, aka he is no longer connected with he got a demotion. He got a demotion. Like if he was in a role at the company before, then he also had extra access as chairman of the board, and he had the ability to uh, effectively decree as chairman of the board, and order people around a bit. And he no longer has that power. And so I would imagine that this is probably reflected on his leadership style to allow Sam's issues to happen. I think ultimately what happens in this case is they will find a new chairman of the board and try to pass all the blame onto Greg if something goes wrong. That's typically how it works. And so it's possible that the chairman of the board is just thrown under the bus here, but typically if they're firing the CEO and the chairman of the board, which is the guy that you got to realize is that the chairman of the board is basically the boss of the CEO. Everybody wants to be a CEO because they think that will make them the ultimate boss. That's only the case if you're not a charity or a publicly traded company or a company with other regulatory requirements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The fact is, CEOs have bosses as well, and that's something you should consider. So in this case, they're firing the CEO because he was not candid with them and that got in the way of their requirements. But they're also getting rid of the guy that managed him and led him. And so that's very interesting. But they won't tell us why, which they never will. This is just a liability thing for them. I would imagine that it, given Sam's reputation, I would imagine it's more on Sam's plate than Greg's. But you never know. Uh, yeah, and they go on about the nonprofit with the core mission between artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. Now, this is an important thing. They're trying to reiterate that the company is nonprofit and that it's not going to pick political sides too much. I don't personally believe that, but I mean they have too much money not to be corrupted by it. But the fact that they're also pointing out that 4 years after their conception, they restructured to ensure that they could raise capital while preserving the nonprofit's mission, governance, and oversight. So basically, what they're saying is that they were founded as a nonprofit, but they're not anymore. And this is effectively the founder being kicked out of their company. And they're acknowledging that. And so this is something that is relevant to us as software development engineers because the fiduciary requirement to be honest and candid at all times as engineers is not just a stereotype, okay? It's something that we're legally required to do. You should be a person of integrity, and you should be honest, and you should be candid. And when you're not, things like this happen and you lose your job. That's why I'm making this video. And, what they're trying to say here is the majority of the board is independent. Independent directors do not have full equity. Okay, that's what I meant up here by independent versus non-independent. And they're confirming that here. And for the record, they're saying, look, yeah, there is a few people with equity, but most of them don't have the equity. It's just the one person that has the equity who's they listed. And so, it's fundamental governance responsibility of the board to advance the mission and preserve the principle of its charter, which is a fancy way of saying that the company has its own version of a constitution. It's called its charter, and basically it's the founding principles that it was founded on that it wants to be held to. And so this is interesting. They're trying to say, look, we are a company. We restructured after being founded as a nonprofit, but they're a for-profit company now, right? So it's basically just marketing, honestly. And but this is so big because they've basically said, look, Sam lied to us. That's what I get from this. I read this and I read between the lines, and I read he was not candid, and I think, oh, he lied. He refused to communicate. He wasn't collaborative. It was his way or the highway, or worse, maybe he misrepresented some things that were really important. And the fact that it was, hindering its ability to exercise its responsibilities, that is a huge thing. Okay. If you're in a leadership position and you're in an uncomfortable situation, you don't want to admit the truth, you've already lost. Okay. As a lead dev of your small team, you're probably not going to encounter situations where you can be kicked out of the entire company over something like this. But it's important to be honest and candid with everybody in the company that you work with about things in general, all the same. And so it's not just about the damage to you, it's about the damage to the company if you do something wrong, or if you lie, or if you're not consistently candid in your communications. And so a lot of people that I've worked with historically have noted that I'm a very direct individual. And it's out of the sincere desire for everyone to have the same information and to be honest, which is why I have the username that I do. But it was also a play on the fact that I could be blunt sometimes. And so I probably should have named myself Blunt Dwayne. But the problem with that is that holds connotations that I don't agree with or I take part in. And so didn't want to misrepresent myself. The the board no longer has confidence in his ability to continue leading. Wow. Like, this is the opposite of a referral. This is we don't trust him, neither should you. This is a career ending event for most people. And so his biggest issue will be he will probably want, if I was him, he will want to start something and he will probably have to worry about non-competes. So it may not even be something AI related. And if it is something AI related, it might be possible that OpenAI can go after him because non-competes are still okay. But here's the deal. I would fully expect him to be in that. If that was the case, I would expect him to either get garden leave or some other form of thing to extend the non-compete, because non-competes are not perpetual in a lot of states, especially in California where they are illegal. At least I think they're illegal. I'm not a lawyer, so I could be wrong. But I'm under the impression that in California, non-competes are made illegal. So let's just look that up. Non-competes legal, CA. expressly unlawful for employers to include post-employment non-compete clauses in employment contracts to require employees to enter post-employment non-compete agreements. Governor Newsom signs bill. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I guess there is no non-compete, but the yeah, so he might just build out a competing AI company with a different mission. That would be interesting to see. But all the same, this is huge because we're going to see a lot more of the fallout. A lot of people make videos like this. One of the things that you have to understand is that companies don't spend money unless they have to. Okay, they spent money on someone's time to make this announcement. Okay, and they did that because they had to, because they'd made the choice to get rid of this person as their CEO and remove them from the board of directors. Hiring is extremely expensive. The recruiting process is not cheap, and just hiring even just one recruiter for an executive role like this typically requires that there's a bonus for the recruiter, and there's also typically what happens is recruiters get a sales commission equal to a percentage of the person's uh, remuneration for a year or whatever it is. And so, if you're getting 20% of what the person's being paid and they're getting paid millions of dollars a year, you got to pay that out to the recruiter. And the problem there is that a lot of people try to get into recruiting illegally because of that. And in reality, in America at least, we actually have laws against uh, recruiters or HR people who are outside of America working roles that are based in America. I've made videos about this. But for this particular situation, it's not cheap for OpenAI. I mean, they've got the money clearly, but this is this is an earth-shattering event for any startup, and I honestly expected it to take at least a year or two before he left. Typically, companies enjoy having the founder for as long as possible, especially if they're executing. It's typically only after the founder It's typically only after the company reaches a stage where the founder's experience and skills are no longer sufficient to maintain growth that the board considers forcibly exiting the CEO. And then only if they have the ability to do so. Now, they clearly have the ability to do so here. So they've taken that choice. What's interesting here is that the person that was chairman of the board will report to the new CEO. And so, given that they've already stated above that they're going to be replacing the CEO, this is probably for continuity. My guess is that this person was basically told to step down and given the ability to keep their exits, and all that fun stuff, if they help with the transition, is my guess. And my guess, my presumption, my total swag, uh, you know, silly, wild ass guess is that this is to. My guess is that Greg and the CTO will end up talking a lot, and all that information will go into Greg's head. And then after they decide they find the person they want to be CEO, and that transition happens. Uh, Greg will probably be part of the handoff for the new CTO as well. Because typically what happens in these situations is the people in leadership or get transferred to are considered too toxic for the company because they know too much. And so it will be an interesting thing to see if OpenAI keeps this woman around in the company after she is no longer CEO. And I would expect that that will not be the case. I think what will probably happen, and this is just a wild ass guess, is after they find the new CEO, there'll be a transition period, maybe even as long as a year. And then we'll be finding that the CTO is moving on. maybe with a golden parachute, maybe without one, whatever. But what this does mean is that the company is going to change dramatically soon. And that's it. I mean, that's yeah. So hey, am I wrong? Am I right? Tell me. Apply in the comments. Make it known. I actually want to know what your opinions are because, from my perspective, I could be wrong. And let's face it, I don't know everything. I'm an engineer, so I just want to learn as much as I can about everything.